Well, hello and good evening. My name's Andrew Stuck. I'm one of the co-producers of Walk, Listen, Create. That's a social enterprise supporting artists, writers and performers who have walking as part of their practice. So if you've come to us via Eventbrite and are unaware of us and you'd like to register and join our community, we'd be delighted to have you along. It's free to register and you can link work there and join our community. We'd love to have you. One of the things that we do is we run writing competitions, and that's how we came across Lydia Kennaway, as Lydia was the winner of our poetry category in our writing competition last year. And her prize was to become our poet in residence. And her choice of what to do was to conceive and host these events, these Footloose events, which are close conversations with poets. And as you all know, it's Malika Booker who's her guest today. But first, I'm going to introduce Lydia with the biography she sent me. So just bear with me one moment, and then I'm going to hand over to Lydia, and she's going to roll from there. Okay, so Lydia Kennaway is Walk, Listen, Create's first poet in residence. Her debut pamphlet, A History of Walking, was published by Happenstance Press in 2019, and she also earned an MA in Writing Poetry from Newcastle University that year. Her work has appeared in 10 anthologies and in magazines including The Rialto, Poetry and Audience, Strix, and Ink, Sweat and Tears. Lydia won the Flambard Poetry Prize in 2017, was commended in the 2021 Magma Poetry Competition, and shortlisted for the Bridport Prize in 2018 and 2020. And also for the York Poetry Prize in 2020. She's read at festivals including Poetry in Aldborough, the Ilkley Literature Net Festival, and Newcastle Poetry Festival, and the Leeds Literature Festival. So Lydia, lots of festival experience. I'm going to hand over to you to continue the show.
Thanks very much, Andrew. It's great to be here. And I'm really delighted to have Malika Booker here this evening. For those of you who haven't been to Footloose before, the format is pretty simple. Each of us has brought a poem that we feel responds in some way, relates to the other's poem. And tonight our theme is hurricanes. We have 2 hurricane poems. I'll read my poem. Malika will comment on it. Malika will read her poem. I'll share my thoughts on that. And then we'll have a conversation about the way that the poems either do or do not share territories. It is a huge honor to have Malika Booker here tonight. Malika is a poetry lecturer at Manchester Metropolitan University, a British poet of Guyanese and Grenadian parentage, and co-founder of Malika's Poetry Kitchen. Her collection, Pepper Seed, published by People Tree Press in 2013, was shortlisted for the OCM Bocas Prize and the Seamus Heaney Centre 2014 Prize for First Full Collection. Malika currently hosts and curates People Tree Press's literary podcast, New Caribbean Voices. A Cave Canem Fellow and inaugural poet in residence at the Royal Shakespeare Company, Malika was awarded the Chumley Award in 2019 for outstanding contribution to poetry, and her poem, The Little Miracles, won the Forward Prize for Best Single Poem in 2020. Malika received her MA from Goldsmiths University and is a PhD candidate at the University of Newcastle. And believe it or not, that is the abridged version of Malika's bio, and only covers a few of her many achievements, awards, and activities in poetry. So Malika and I are neighbors here in Leeds, in Yorkshire, in England. And Leeds is also the home to People Tree Press that published the book Pepper Seed that Malika will be reading from tonight. So I wondered if Malika could just tell us a little bit about People Tree Press.
Yes, so People Tree Press is a small independent publisher. There's a small amount of staff, but they box above that the weight of their staff. They publish. They're the foremost publishers of Caribbean literature from the Caribbean and the diaspora on these shores, and have produced a lot of. And they publish novelists, fiction, short fiction, flash fiction, poetry, and memoirs and essays, and they've been done, achieved a lot of prizes. So they also publish people like Roger Robinson, Jacob Ross, and a large Leonie Ross's book, that prize-winning book, was published there. So, and they're based in Leeds.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll get right on and read the first of our two hurricane poems. The first one is Naming the Storm. And this is the opening poem in a sequence dedicated to the memory of my brother Andy, who died in Florida during lockdown when travel was restricted. It's a work in progress. The sequence as a whole is really a celebration of siblinghood. It is such a unique relationship. Any brother and sister, sister and sister, brother and brother. But as you might expect, there are undercurrents of the enforced separation so many of us experienced in the last couple of years. Naming the Storm. It's hurricane season where you are, 4,000 miles away. I need to see you, so I figure I'll walk on water, since flying is out of the question. I try to keep up with the latest, learn each storm's name before it fizzles out and the next one forms, spinning its way across the ocean. I'll turn up with gas for the chainsaw, help you with shutters, count candles, fill the tub. We'll sit in the foggy indoor dusk, telling each other stories we've told 100 times. We'll talk about them by name, way back to Donna and Dora, but Andrew and Charlie too, like anecdotes about crazy aunts and uncles, the kind of conversation every family has from time to time. The legendary and dysfunctional, the close calls and disasters. But realistically, I won't be able to reach you. There's bound to be some final obstacle like I-95 as a river, and I've used up all my walking on water powers, and I'm too scared to swim, and flying, as we know, is out of the question. So I'll be that fool reporter clutching a mic while palm trees do a frantic hula in the background. Maybe you'll catch me on TV. Me trying to shout above the waffling wind, sodden and stating the obvious before the power goes out.
Thank you, Lydia. I'm really struck by this poem. It's such a deceptive poem, and on the face of it, it seems very very simple. The tone of voice is deceptively tender and matter of fact, and the address feels like it's addressing someone who's loved. That's what I felt. But I also felt, as the reader, it feels like it's caressing you as well, because the address, it is hurricane season. Where are you? Where you are, 4,000, and I need to see you. And when you're reading it, you become that you. So you become that person who is being addressed, which is beautiful. It's very conversational tone and light in contrast to the catastrophic storms that it names. And I'll come to that in a minute. I'm struck by the also that seething underneath this distinctive voice. We're lulled in by this voice, almost like a lullaby, almost like the nursery rhymes that used to be told to children, where the nursery rhyme seems innocent, but when you investigate it or when you dig underneath, there's something there's something dark or something moving or something catastrophic happening at the bottom. So I was struck by that about the poem, and the fact that this distinctive voice pulls us to attention and pulls us through. But on further reading, I began to notice some things. I began to notice this figure. I walk on water since flying. And figure became more than just I figure as a figure of speech. It became a figure, someone who is being addressed. And then the notion of walking on water, one of the most epic biblical kind of and most knowledgeable biblical miracles, almost as if the writer is asking for a miracle. I'll walk on water since flying is out of the question. And also, there's only one person who walked on water, so walking on water is out of the question. You feel as if the poet is kind of confined in somewhere and is not able to walk. But there's something about that allusion to an epic biblical moment. And then what I was struck by is the hurricanes that are named. There's some of the kind of biggest, most catastrophic storms, Dora, Andrew, that occurred in the 60s. And then Charlie occurred, actually, interesting enough, just before, is in the hurricanes come around August right down to September. But just coincidentally, the way poems talk to each other, Charlie occurs in the same burst of storms that Ivan, the poem I address, refers to. And so I started thinking, who is being addressed in this poem? Who is the reader speaking to? What is swirling underneath the intimacy? Especially that when the voice gets practical. Gas for the chainsaws. I'm going to bring you practical things. There's something that needs practical things here, and we feel it's not only the storm, and there's a storm here, and we feel like the poet is not naming what the storm is. Hurricanes are named after people, and part of me wondered if one of the names of the hurricanes is not the name of the person being addressed. And then this idea of realistically, I won't be able to reach you, that kind of repetition of not being able to reach the person, I found quite moving. It's ecological, subtly ecological, but it's very, very catastrophic and very emotive. And I think that's because of the storms that are, when I went to read up on those hurricanes and those particular storms, they caused immense damage. They destroyed houses, they destroyed people. They're memorable. They're really highly memorable events. And then I'm too scared to swim, and flying as we know it is out of the question, which repeats, I'll walk on water since flying is out of the question. I'm too scared to swim, and flying as we know is out of the question. Why this repeating? I've used up all of my walking on water's powers. There are the hints. There's the hint of what's bubbling under the surface. And then this turn, which I found very intriguing. So we feel like we're going to get the storm being named. And the storm is not named. The storm is alluded to as if there's something going on in the family as well as the poem. When the poet says the conversations we'll talk about are the legendary, the dysfunctional, the close calls and the disasters, which could be about the hurricanes, but seem to be in fact also about what is happening in the family at this time. But then the poet widens the lens, and I'll become that fool reporter clutching a mic. And we get the idea that news is here. Some news is happening here. And you'll catch me on TV where the media, that distance, and everything here, it seems to be around distance. The news giving an account of a hurricane is different than a person giving an account of a hurricane. And what I loved is the fact that each further reading yielded these results. It wasn't immediately apparent. On my first reading, I thought, name of the storm, but these hurricanes are quite devastating, and this tone is so at odds with what is happening. It's hurricane season. Where are you? Where you are, sorry, 4,000 miles away, and I need to see you so. We'll talk about them by name, I wouldn't be able to reach you. And then so I'll be that fool reporter. And there it's become distant. And so this is what I love, the illusions in there. And then the syntactical way that the poem moves in terms of the line breaks. It's like a snake, it's snaking, almost like, and this is my fave, there are two bits that really stand out for me. The frantic hula. The poem is almost like doing the frantic hula with the way the lines are, I'm doing this, can everyone see me? The way the lines are snaking around, while the palm trees do a frantic hula, but you feel like the whole poem has had you snaking through all these different emotions with line breaks. I'll try to keep up with the latest. Learn each storm's name. So you're always taking the syntax is really almost working and trying to imitate what is happening in life, what you feel is at the bottom of the poem, but also what is happening in the storm. I think that's some of what I wanted to say about the poem. The other thing I was struck by, Lydia, is that use of, I can't say it because I'm dyslexic, but fudgy, F-U-G-G-Y. I think it's fudgy.
Foggy.
Foggy, you see, that's it. I knew that.
Yeah.
I would get that wrong dyslexically. I'm struck by that because of the mugginess. I need to grab a tissue. Sorry, everybody, my sinuses are acting up. I just need to. But I'm struck by that term and the term realistically and just how much work that does. It's the fudgy indoor dusk and the fudgy. And then when I kind of explored that word in the dictionary and explored the meaning of that word, how that word kind of, it's almost close. It's mugginess. And so some of it, so again, that word I think is a pivotal word in the poem and is doing a lot of work and hints at something that the indoor dusk is not the dusk. And it's just that we wouldn't have, I feel like there's such a catastrophe coming out and the worried, it feels like the whole poem is a worrying. It's a worrying I can't be there. I can't support you. So I was very moved by the poem the more that I read it, and I really am glad that that I'm given this space to actually speak to you about it. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Malika. My first impression is, boy, your students are lucky. You know, you must be an absolutely fantastic teacher. As usual, I've learned things about my poem from someone else's perspective, but I'm also very touched that you have unwrapped the layers of it, especially that you've seen the hula, the franticness just beneath the surface, and also that you picked up that it's called naming the storm, and yet I don't name the storm. It's a kind of prelude or overture to the rest of the sequence. So it's a kind of scene setting. And you absolutely got it. I think it's such fate that we've both written hurricane poems. And yeah, it's one of those just happy coincidences, because I knew you. I didn't look out for someone who's written hurricane poems. And I don't know, you have firsthand experience of hurricane, and I, at a very young age, Hurricane Donna, do remember hurricanes, and one of my brothers and I had a sort of game we played in heavy rainstorms of putting out our sand buckets to see which filled first. And I recall this, and when he may confirm or deny this, putting this out in the front yard, because it's what we always did. And my mother, calling us in and saying, "You can't be out there. Come in." I thought, what's the problem? We always do this, just not comprehending the enormity of what was going on around me.
Mm.
So would you like to introduce your hurricane poem?
Thank you. Yes. Also, I will end by saying that it's an honor that you actually like trusted me with a work in progress as well. That's such an honor. So I'm going to read Island Grief after Hurricane Ivan. Hurricane Ivan was a devastating hurricane, and it had such a really catastrophic effect on Grenada. We were so worried about all our families there. It wiped out most of the nutmeg industry and most of the industry that the country survived on. I wanted to write a poem about it, and I had been leaving Grenada and heard on the radio that a man and his wife had put together a dictionary of Grenadian term a Grenadian dictionary for the vernacular. So I was like, yes. I said to my aunt, we need to figure out where they are on the radio station and detour from the airport. I'm a poet. I need that dictionary, this handbook. So I remember thinking I wanted to write about this hurricane, but I wanted to do it from the landscape and using the language that was integral there and going through and grabbing really specific words specific to Grenada and the landscape. Island Grief after Hurricane Ivan. All over the island is pure bacchanal. Zinc roofs dance feral in the pitch dark, and all man jack gone wild. Everything back in front. Crapo smoky pipe tonight, as shack trees shoo with marmy apple trees, whilst Jumbie umbrella mako the scene. Everywhere is pure jab mass, a fierce sound clash driving all the mongoose to run in circles like they catch jigger. The rain falls zigzags like fat flies, raising choruses of mosquitoes from rivers, humming black clouds, infectious. Yet sugarcane stalks refuse to sway, just stand like rigid statues. Bay leaf and cinnamon stop making joke and start to pray hard until breeze drag off her clothes and bawl for moonlight to sing a lullaby, sing on and on till her voice grows hoarse. Then bitter aloes start fighting with black sage bush, throwing hard cough as dropping coconuts thump, whoop, vap. And it is madness in the river water where tiny tittery swirl and bubble. Meanwhile, manaku and jackfish lament nutmeg's demise as Bazodi island parrots stand numb like statues, their claws curled around branches of pomerac trees. Moonlight is page to cradle the moaning wounded. O Spice Isle, let it not die here. O Lord, there is pepper in the dead's mouths and coffins fly overhead.
Thank you so much, Malika. Well, straight up, I have to say I have got first line envy. All over the island is pure bacchanal. And how can you not just keep reading? That is just wonderful. Last month on Footloose, we looked at a poem called Kissing Gate by Emma Storr, and I commented that it was almost a concrete poem, that the shape of the poem on the page was the subject, described the subject. I think what we have here is almost the opposite. It's an oral poem where the energy and the richness of the words in your ear create a soundscape that's as powerful as a hurricane. It washes over you, it hits you. It's, even if you're not familiar with all of the Grenadian Creole, it's the mere sound of the words that it becomes a poem hurricane. And it has a kind of beautiful chaos to it. And so much onomatopoeia, which is one of those words I learned in grade school that I thought, oh, this is a wonderful word. This is so much fun. And the line, I think my favorite dropping coconuts, thump, whoop, vap. It's what my 5-year-old granddaughter calls words that feel good in your mouth. But there is throughout it a juxtaposition of beauty and violence that actually runs through this whole collection. And I think it's a very subtle way of drawing your reader into material that is horrific, where they would otherwise just want to flinch or avert their eyes. The beauty of the language is so seductive that it draws you into the poems. Here, plants and animals are anthropomorphized and they're capitalized, so it kind of reads like the cast of some crazy play, or well, a bacchanal or a carnival, something that is chaotic and tragic and also slapstick at times. It's such a mix, but I think what makes it really powerful is that you don't personify the hurricane itself. We own, a bit like my poem, Not Naming the Storm. You only know the hurricane by its effects. And it's this faceless power that makes it so terrifying. And I think that in doing that, I mean, it's clearly a poem about environmental and economic destruction and disaster, devastation, but it's also about the island's legacies and violence and resistance to powers that may or may not be faceless. So it's a lament on so many levels. I wanted to, well, maybe I'll say it now, about language. I mean, throughout this book, you use a variety of well, registers, forms of address, but also a genuine variety of types of English. And I think, for instance, there's a poem in the voice of the grandmother that's Guyanese Creole. And I was very struck, pleasantly so, at the fact that this poem sits on the page and there are no footnotes and there's no glossary. And I imagined if perhaps there were conversations about this with the editor, perhaps there weren't, and you can tell me later. But in my mind, I pictured it like a gourmet meal. And, you know, the chef has been slaving over this meal and comes into the restaurant and everyone's on their phones Googling, you know, what these ingredients are, or what is the meaning of this culinary term in the menu, you know, and it's like, no, just eat the food. And that to me is how you've presented this. You know, if we want to find out more, we can later. And I think I found a website for that book that you just showed us. And I did look up some terms, but if that had been offered at the same time, it just, this poem needs no justification. You know, it does its work, whether or not you understand every word. And I'm just so delighted with that decision. So that's where I got to with this.
Wow, that's so insightful and fantastic. I feel like I learned a lot, and I feel really validated that you also saw the legacies of plantocracy and of colonialism in the poem as well, you know, because sometimes you have these things that you're trying to address, but the poem takes over and it feels like it gets lost because the poem says, I'm not writing that. I've decided I want to do this thing, which is a wordplay and a sound play, and it's not about that. So I was really moved actually that you undermined, that you got that from the poem as well.
Well, Can you tell us something about the use of language and the decision not to provide any explanation, not to provide, what was there any debate, or was it clear from the beginning that
I think once I started to explore these words and then actually started to dance with the words, and I actually I would I would put something down, because in Grenada, like, people use a lot of, he hit her wutup, and it was one black anang, when the pots fell. So this kind of onomatopoeia is part of the language. And so what I would do is read it out, and the coconuts couldn't fall, in a certain way. So it became this sonic kind of exploration, but also this dramatic thing happening. These two are fighting, this is happening, a whole kind of interior drama. It never came up with People Tree Press, actually. And it didn't occur to me, because I thought sonically, sometimes poems sonically, there's so much happening, and I love the twisting of the sounds in your mouth and the trying to pronounce some of those things, and bacchanal in one sense, even bacchanal sounds nice, or shack, the sounds of those words. I think if poetry is around language, then, and language can give meaning, then is this not what the lyric poem is about, in a way?
Exactly, yes, let it sing. I think bazooty is going to be one of my new favorite words. Is that how you say bazooty?
It says bazo.
Bazooty.
It's like when someone is so silly, when they're so stupid that it's beyond stupid, or in Trinidad they say stupidity, like it's beyond, it's not stupid, it's beyond,
Yeah.
but it's not comical.
But you see those parrots, and just all these images of the wildlife, just like, what the hell is going on here?
I was struck by the idea, the bravery of naming the storm, and then there not being this name, there not being this naming of this thing, and this total journey where you would think the literal journey or the rational journey would be at the end, the naming, but instead a kind of detour to this media. Did you know you weren't going to name it, or is that the poem as well, when that spirit possession of writing taken over?
It was the latter. Yeah, it was unnameable. The emotional storm of the time. There were no words for it, so all I could do is talk around it. And I think, just as your poem, I don't want to use the word agenda, the other meaning is more powerful for not being explicit. It works much more, because it sort of seeps into you if it's not named. And that's what you're doing with this poem as well.
And the other thing I wanted to ask you is the repetition of in different ways, very subtly. Like, on the first two readings, I didn't even notice those repetitions happening, of the walking on water and the can't fly to you. Tell me a bit about that.
I think it's an accumulation of frustrations, this fantasy of, like, I'm here and I'm stuck here and you're stuck there and I just want to be there. And it's a repeated attempt. It's almost a childlike, the door is locked, but you keep pulling at it. And each time, the last time, I have this sort of notion that in the previous fantasy, this was a superpower. I could walk on water in my mind. And even that concept, even that notion, it becomes impossible. That there's a story where the superpower, the superhero runs out of her powers, and I think that's where that came from.
Yeah, I found it really powerful, and also because it's genderizing Jesus, who's presented as this man who walked on water, but here's this woman saying, I'll walk on water. And there's this woman saying, you know, I've used up all my walking on water powers. I felt that there was something powerful in that genderizing and that claiming in that gendered voice. And
Mhm.
also, which was really intriguing. I started looking up how much I started going off on a tangent, looking up how do they name hurricanes and how much are men and how much are women.
Well, yes, I've been reading about that too. And the research that has shown, you know, I forget what year, maybe 72, maybe earlier, that they were always women's names. And then they started using male names as well. And the research shows that if a hurricane is given a male name, people take preparation more seriously.
Wow. Wow.
Now I cannot quote and put it in the chat, but I will look it up because I did make a note of it. So perhaps that's why they started using.
And Lydia, why those specific hurricanes? I was really when I was researching, I realized that Charlie was the hurricane that preceded.
Yeah,
I was in the same band of hurricanes that Ivan was in. I was like, my God, our poems are really talking to each other.
yeah.
I wondered why those were you hinting at a time period? Because 3 of those are in the 60s, and then the other one is in 09. And I wondered, that's the thing that, you know, I'm glad that's the thing that will bug you when you're reading, that you want to ask the poet.
Yes.
So I'm glad you're here, because I feel like that's where I can't decipher the meaning or the specificity of that.
This may be a disappointing answer. I was looking for benign sounding. I mean, I knew the histories of the different hurricanes, but I was looking for hurricanes that sounded like aunts and uncles. You know, Charlie sounds so, you know, like a friendly, bumbling uncle. It doesn't. And Donna, you know, when I was little, it sounds like, you know, a 1950s housewife of the, you know, the time. Andrew, I put in there because it is the name of the brother I'm commemorating. And also it's there's also family history with that hurricane, so I wanted to add that to the mix. But in general, I was just looking for hurricanes that sounded like, are they talking about aunts and uncles, or are they talking about hurricanes? You know, it's the it would add to the intimacy of that little sort of closed world that they've created with the shutters down.
Yeah. So beautiful.
So were there many drafts to your poem, or was it one of those gifts from above that just landed?
I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I just had this thing I wanted to, it was such a profound thing, Hurricane Ivan, and I wanted to write about it. But whenever I approached it head on, writing about Hurricane Ivan, it became just this litany of the things, the devastation, and it was just so hard. So just going through the dictionary and taking out these, thinking about, oh, what do they call that? Jackfruit, or, you know, and finding out, okay, the nutmeg industry was affected, the cane fields were affected, the banana industry was affected. And kind of banana had to come up because banana didn't sound, it didn't fit with that rich tapestry that the sound was created. And just starting to think about them as kind of alive in that space, and what the reactions, how they were acting, but also kind of being ventriloquists for people, how people were reacting, you know.
Yes.
In stress, arguments between family, you know, people who decide not to take any precautions, people who decide to take the precautions. So it was more, as soon as I started to get the language and started to figure out what people were doing, I think I was stuck like with the parrots.
Well, that's one of my favorite parts.
For a long time, I was like, what is happening with the parrots? Because when you think about parrots, you think about them speaking.
Yes.
But I was just like, well, these parrots, I mean, their voice is going to be lost in this space. So what? I kept writing side essays or side notes. What is happening with the parrots? Like, because I wanted the parrots to be in there,
Yeah, yeah,
and I wanted them to be, obviously they couldn't be doing what parrots, the
yeah.
stereotype, but what could happen with them? And so I was stuck on the parrots for a long time.
Well, that effort paid off.
And I wanted to fit Tittery in, because
Yeah,
Tittery
yeah.
is a
It's
little
such,
fish.
yeah,
And
it's
I
such a
love the
beautiful
sound of
word. Yeah,
Tittery.
yeah, yeah.
I just love the sound of Tittery, and I wanted Tittery to come in some ways.
Mhm,
There were some
mhm.
sounds that I thought, it's just
Yeah.
like bubble gum.
So did you know that it was going, I mean, it takes a turn and we have the elemental at the end. We have the moon. And did you know it was going to go there?
No, but I have some things that I like that are kind of, I like moonlight and I like moon and I like crossroads.
Hmm.
So I was trying to get a crossroad in there, but it was like, no, this is not anything about crossroad.
It looks like that, doesn't it? You say, oh, but I really want to
Yeah.
use that word, but
I
yeah,
actually thought it was going to end on the crossroad. That
yeah,
crossroad was going to, because it felt like, Grenada was at a crossroad. And I'm
yeah.
like, no, I'm
It's,
not
it's
interested in
too
crossroad.
tidy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it was like, what is moonlight doing? Because there's this darkness that comes during the hurricane. It's funny, I have never experienced a hurricane, but I grew up with my mom and my aunts all speaking, and my mom showing scars that she had from hurricane season, and it was such a thing. And
Hmm.
then Ivan was so huge, and every summer, in my house, people be hurricane watching how the hurricane is moving.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, and then the Spice Isle, it felt like I like odes and laments.
Yes. Yeah. With you on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it's a biblical, it has a very biblical, almost from the Psalms.
Mm.
It, yeah, yeah. And it is a prayer. It is,
And I feel like when catastrophe is happening, no matter what you think you are, you call on some other being.
yeah, yeah.
You just call on some other being. And for me, I feel like hurricanes are like Armageddon.
Hmm. Hmm.
They feel like you can come out. It just feels like an Armageddon, like a whole thing. And the only thing that it feels like when people say they climbed up a mountain, and when they got to the top of the mountain, they realized just how insignificant they are to
Yes.
nature. And it
Yeah.
feels like the hurricane does that. When everything is
Yeah.
stripped from you,
Yeah.
the only
Yeah.
thing you can do is pray.
Yeah. 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 Well, I think it's astonishing that, we knew each other first and then decided to find some poems that might have something to do with each other, and then yeah, vat boom. Boom, vat. Thank you so much, Malika. It's been
Ah,
such a pleasure to have you on Footloose. And thank you to everyone for attending. It's been a really, really exciting, well, for me, it's been a really exciting episode. And next month, it's Jake Morris Campbell, and we'll be, what are we talking about? We're talking about ownership of space. We're talking about flâneurs and hikers. And yes, do come to that one as well. I'll hand back to Andrew now. Thank you so much, Malika.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrew and Lydia, for having me.
Well, that was fantastic. Fantastic timing once again from Lydia. She's brilliant at bringing things to a close right on time. But that was really insightful stuff from both poets. So fabulous evening's entertainment. So thank you very much to both of you. And as Lydia's mentioned, next up is Jake Morris Campbell. I think the last Monday in the month is the 27th of June. So a while yet to go. And in the interim, why not go back and read Malika's works in Pepperseed and buy a copy of the book. I'm looking forward to reading more. Anyway, Malika, thank you very much. And Lydia, once again, thank you
Thank
for
you.
being our Footloose host.